Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage the author of The Pirates That Don't Do Anything, Mr. Eric Metaxas.
We just stay home and lie around. And if you ask us to do anything, we'll just tell you we don't do anything.
Get a hold of Eddie.
I am not the author of The Pirates Who Don't Do Anything, but I did write a book about the pirates who don't do anything. I can't take too much credit. I am a VeggieTales writer. That's not a joke. I was the author of the Hamlet omelet parody on Lyle the Kindly Viking. I know some of you were wondering. That's the only reason you showed up. Now you know. And I had the honor of being the voice of the narrator on the VeggieTales Esther video. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And it is those two accomplishments and those alone that qualify me to interview your Senator Marco Rubio, who will be coming up here any moment. I have to tell you, by the way, before he comes up, I live in New York City, which is ever so slightly more secular and less conservative than the great state of Florida. Just that much, honestly. And that's only for the last, 80 or 100 years, to be perfectly fair. But when I come to places like this, I cannot tell you how encouraging it is to me. So I want to thank you for letting me be here. And I think that looks like Marco Rubio. Hello, Senator. Privileged to meet you. Wonderful.
Good to see you.
To meet you. And you know, you're not.
There we go.
You're not drunk at all. Some idiot was saying that you were late because you'd been drinking to celebrate your son's victory, and that's obviously not true. So I want to apologize to all of you, whoever that was. You know, we can't control everything. Well, we've got a lot
Just to clarify for the press, that was a joke. That was a joke, right? There's some press.
Yeah, let's clarify. Let's clarify. I can't believe it. We've got a lot to talk about. First of all, I want to say, I'm happy to say we've got a lot in common. Maybe that's why they thought I could sit here with you. We're both sons of immigrants, different immigrants, right?
Right, are you Cuban?
This is a tough crowd. We're both conservatives, obviously, and we're both senators. So really, you in a more overt way, but it is... All right, I've got to just start out with a stupid question. I'm embarrassed I don't know the answer to this, but Rubio.
Yeah.
What is that, Italian?
By way of Cuba.
Yeah? Because somebody, I thought you were from Palermo or something like that. No, I happen to know that that you're by way of Cuba. I want to, now since you're Cuban, I can ask you another question, and then I'll get serious. I can make a statement. Quiero invitarte de mi fiesta de cumpleaños. Okay?
Right.
So if you're free, I'd like you to come.
Is that what you thought you said? You just told me how you saved a bunch of money on your car insurance by switching to Geico.
I knew. See, he was waiting for that. I set him up. Unbelievable. I'm glad you have a sense of humor. We need that in our leaders.
We need that in Washington.
And I know. But it's wonderful to be with you. I want to first of all say what a joy it is to hear you speak tonight and to say the things that you said. Because the one thing that we do lack, I think, in our political life right now is somebody who has the kind of vision that you do that goes all the way from fiscal conservatism to social conservatism. And I hope you can hold those two things together in your person as you lead. I want to ask you, first of all, at what point in your life, you're obviously serious about your faith. Was there a point in your life when you got more serious about your faith? What is your journey? Because all of us have different journeys. Some of us just were, serious about it at age 3, and some people, in my case, I wasn't 25 till the penny dropped.
So, like most people, I get serious about my faith when something goes wrong, right? That's one of the first things that people... But, I don't remember any time in my life growing up when faith was not a part of our home in some way, especially my mother, as I think is often the case. really led our family to have a faith component. So I tell people, one of the stories I tell people, I remember growing up, I'd go to church and come home and dress up like a priest, or I'd go see something on TV and dress up like I was a preacher or stuff like that. So I always had this inclination as a young child to copy whatever I saw on television. Oftentimes that was issues of faith. And as a result of that, I remember as a young age reading a lot about faith, wanting to learn about what it is they were talking about. So that's instructive. But like most people, when I got to, I shouldn't say most people, but when I got into later in life, I still was a believer, but I wandered a little bit from it. It wasn't as the kind of priority that it should be. And in recent years, probably in the last decade, who I really credit in our home with, and I don't say this with any, obviously it's a testament to her, but I say this as an admission to you that I needed to do a better job of it, is my wife. That's kind of really reinvigorated faith in our home over the last 10 to 12 years. And that's important. I think that was an important role she played. Again, not that it ever didn't matter, but I think sometimes when you're young and in a hurry, you perhaps don't prioritize things the right way.
For sure. Yeah, family, marriage, and kids will kind of do that to you. They make you think about the big questions in a way that you don't.
Well, it's not about you anymore.
Before that, right, or at least it shouldn't be.
Right.
You figure that out, and if you don't know, they'll tell you.
That's right.
Right. As somebody in the sometimes toxic climate of Washington, how do you deal with the growing hostility to faith? I talked about it in my comments before your speech, and you talked about it in your speech. And everyone in this room recognizes that there's a hostility that wasn't there before. How do you deal with that in Washington and as you go around the country?
Well, I think part of the way I deal with it is just to understand that outside of what we think, if you just watch television all day, you think that's the way most of the country is. But in fact, it's not. There's this, I don't know if it's a silent majority, because I don't think it's very silent, but I believe a majority of the American people believe in the things that we do. And I think that not only do polls reflect that, but your travels will reflect that. If you go across the country, you're going to find people that agree with what we believe in the sense that these values that I spoke about in my speech are critical to success. So I think what I take comfort in is that outside of that, what is really an artificial environment of political debate and 24-hour cable news and the entertainment media complex and things of this nature, the vast majority of our country, particularly in the heartland of our country, but even throughout the state as well, share these values that we do. Those things are still there. You may not know that by watching movies or TV all day, but they really still are there. It is still a majority of this nation that believes these things.
Yes, somebody's applauding. I have to say that I agree with you. As I said, I live in New York City, and I watch, the media. And from those two places, you'd never know how many Americans have the values that we do. And I think our real battle, in a way, is in the media, because we sort of can't get a fair shake. When I was doing some research on you before this event, there was a news thing popped up that you were speaking at an anti-gay event. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Let me read that. And it turned out that I also was speaking at that anti-gay event. And this is that event. And these are the bigots that were in that article, right here, these people. And I'm shocked. But I thought, what an extraordinary thing to have this described that way. How do you deal with that? Because that really was, I think it was an article in the Guardian, the UK Guardian, but obviously there's a kind of nastiness and a hostility that if you don't think a certain way, you will be targeted. How do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, and I alluded to that in the speech that I gave, that we understood, we are often being told, even by people that agree with us, that perhaps these are issues that we shouldn't speak about. But again, they go back to the fundamental core of what makes us a successful country. And I think sometimes we start to think, again, if you watch, I don't mean to put it all on the media, but why not? That you come to think that our country is defined by the government. And the government is not the country. The country is its people and their everyday lives who are changing the lives of other people in tangible ways that you're never going to read about. It's the neighbor who gives an elderly neighbor a ride to the doctor. It's the people volunteering in community groups or Trail Life, the group you saw here today, or other endeavors. That's the country. And so the way I deal with that is by constantly reminding myself that sort of narrative that you just described and these sorts of descriptions of us, that's just part of the noise that's out there. We live in a free society where people are allowed to say anything they want about us, particularly if you're in public life. But the things that matter are the things that matter. And those are the things we need to focus on. And as a policymaker, what matters for me is being on the right side of issues. Sometimes they're the winning side, sometimes they're not. But being on the right side of issues, and particularly issues that are so important to our culture and our values.
Yes. I want to turn to the topic of religious freedom. I don't think you were here yet when I spoke, but this is something that has consumed me. And if you talked to me 2 years ago, I barely knew what religious freedom was. I've got an education in it. And I feel it is perhaps the issue of our time, because it affects all these other issues. Because to talk about the unborn, to talk about marriage, something is happening. I know that you had put forward a bill in 2012 dealing with this. Can you talk a little bit about that? And can you talk about how you see the best way of dealing with this issue of religious freedom?
Well, interestingly enough, you earlier, when we were talking, you said the media. It's important to understand what the media means in the 21st century isn't just the cable news networks and the major networks. It's also us, it's you. Media today means the ability to set up a blog or to communicate in the ways that are now available to us. And that is the way we push back, by creating awareness of this right that also exists to religious liberty. You know, one of the, earlier today there was a mention here that John made of this case. It's a small scale example of this case of the city of Greece, where they're basically trying to disqualify legislative prayer. They're saying you cannot pray before a council meeting because people may be offended. And it's interesting that they use the Establishment Clause in the Constitution to justify their position. But what's even more interesting is that the Establishment Clause was written by people that one of the first things they did after writing the Establishment Clause is go out and hire a chaplain and pray, as they have now for over 200 years in the legislative bodies of this country. So I think it's important to remember that the Constitution is not there. You know, this notion of separation between church and state, you won't find those words in the Constitution. That doesn't mean that we should have an officially sanctioned denomination. The words there are supposed to be to ensure that there's not a hostility between the church and state, so that every individual American can make a choice about how they want to worship or not to worship at all. Religious liberty is not the right thing to do just because it is. It is also a constitutional principle of this country, one of the key ones. And we should speak loudly and clearly about that. And I think we need to make more people aware that that's what's happening now, that there is an effort to silence those or to crowd out of its rightful place the role of the faith community in our country. The government cannot tell you what faith to belong to, but it cannot tell you that you cannot speak about your faith. And that's something that I think we need to be leading on and making more people aware of.
I agree, and I want to say that I don't have the bully pulpit you do, obviously, and I would want to encourage you to educate America about that, because what amazes me is that my generation, your generation, pretty much since the 60s, this has not been taught. Most people don't know about this.
Because you take it for granted.
That's exactly. We don't know. We've had such religious liberty in this country that we hardly know what it is. But I would just want to encourage you to educate. People are thrilled to be educated when, you know, it's not propaganda. And you have a grasp of this that very few political leaders do. But to educate the populace on that. And again, I want to commend you on what you've done thus far. Yeah. I want to just turn briefly. When you talk about the future greatness of America, most of us here think of Reagan because, in a way, the happy warrior, he was able to put forth the idea, even after the Carter presidency, even after Watergate, that we had a future. It seems to require a sunniness and a kind of hope that I think only faith can bring. But I want to ask you in closing here, because we only got a couple of minutes, the idea of a great America, the idea of America having a future and of being a beacon to the world, how do you frame that? How do you sell that idea to people who have at least, it will be 8 years, have dealt with severe restrictions on their liberties and have felt that we're in decline? 4 years of Carter was bad. 8 years of this administration is more than twice as bad. How do you project hope?
Well, a couple things. Number one is that the current administration won't be there in 3 years, so that's something to be hopeful about. And
wow.
but
Thank you. Thank you for reminding us of some great news.
But that actually is related to this, and that is this idea that I pointed to a second ago. This idea that somehow America equals government, or the government, is not accurate. The government has a role to play in our society. It is not the country. The country is our everyday people. And we have problems in our societies. We have problems in our culture. We have problems among the American people. But at its core, the American people are still a great people. They are still out there inventing the next great businesses. They're still out there making a difference in the lives of real people in real ways without the government compelling them to do so. All of that is there. Now, we have some challenges because the world is rapidly changing. Our economy is changing very fast, and it's disrupting people's lives because the world is never going to be the way it used to be, but that's always been the case. Once we adapt to those things, and government has a role to help us get there, I believe it will unleash another American century. Because putting all that aside, look around the world at the countries that are experiencing prosperity. They are the countries that are trying to copy some model of our example. You don't see a rush towards Marxism or socialism or big government around the world. In fact, you have countries that have long been held up as the paradise of big government having to abandon it because that's what happens when you run out of money. On the other side, you have countries that are embracing free enterprise, which I believe is a moral system of economics. It's not a perfect one. No system of economics is. It just simply is the best one that's ever existed because it empowers people to fulfill their potential. You look at the rule of law in this country that protects these fundamental liberties, which give every single person the opportunity to do the following: decide who it is God created them to be and have the real chance to go out and achieve it through hard work and sacrifice. That is still there. Those things are still there in our hearts. They're still there in our country. Now all we need are some leaders that give us the opportunity to achieve that in this 21st century. And I believe that we will. Now, it will take a little longer than I had hoped it would. And certainly the last 6 years have been a setback. But ultimately, I don't just believe we're going to get there. I know we're going to get there. And the reason why I have no choice but to believe it is because I cannot imagine a world without an exceptional America. I cannot imagine what the world will look like. I cannot imagine my children inheriting such a world. I just can't. And so I don't believe that that's what's going to happen, and I pray each night that that's the case. I believe that we are called to rise up to this moment, confront our challenges, and ensure that our children inherit what Americans always leave their children, the greatest single country in the history of the world.
I find myself agreeing with that. And we're out of time. I was going to ask you if someday in the future you were to run for the office of president, whether you would consider a Greek-American running mate. We don't have time. We don't have time for that question. Please, thank you.
No, I will not choose Michael Dukakis.
We don't.
Oh, you were talking about yourself.
No, of course not. I was talking about Spiro Agnew. Let me just say in closing, it's an honor to meet you, and it is a powerful encouragement, not just for me, but for everyone here, to know how you think, what you think, that you exist, and that God is using you in this great country. So God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You're wonderful.